In 2019, a website called thispersondoesnotexist.com went viral. It showed portraits of people which were highly realistic but never existed. And all these people were generated using by StyleGAN. Now all these guns are getting so good at creating fake humans that I'm starting to ask myself, maybe I was generated too. Oh, hello everybody, my name is Dimitri, and today I will talk about a paper which is called a style-based generator architecture for generative adversarial networks. And here you can see the outline of my today's presentation. Now we start first with introduction and motivation, then we go with background and challenges, then we will see the actual architecture of the generator, and then we will see some properties, then we will go with evaluation, then we will see actual samples from this generator, and at the end I will briefly mention the conclusion of the paper, and we'll also see the references. Now, let's start with introduction and motivation. Why traditional GANs are limited. Latent codes are entangled, and small changes affect multiple attributes. It means that you do not have this control over the image. It means that if you want to change something, you will change the whole image. And there is no clear separation between global structure and local details. For example, you want to separately control the pose of the person, but also separately control the skin color or skin pores, for example. And there is a limited control over specific image vectors like pose or texture, because that's what I was talking about. Now, the key questions are, can we separate high-level semantics from fine details in generation? So yeah, we really want to have this separation between like, global structure, high level features like shape of the head, and fine details like color of the hair, for example. And another question is, can we structure the latent space to improve control and interpretability? Now, let's continue with background. What is actually a GAN? A GAN consists of a generator G, which creates synthetic images. And on this figure, you can see that first we are feeding GAN generator with some random noise Z, and this generator G produces a sample, a synthetic image, which is then fed to the discriminator. And this generator tries to fool the discriminator such that the discriminator think, yeah, this image is a real one, where in reality it's a synthetically generated image. And the discriminator tries to distinguish between real images and synthetic images and act as a loss function, you can imagine. Now, which challenges do we have in traditional GANs? There we have a single latent vector Z drives the generator, so feature influences are mixed and entangled. It means that if you slightly change the direction of this vector Z, then you can get completely different image. And yeah, tweaking one value can simultaneously change pose, lightning, and texture. Like that's what I was talking about. If you are changing some single component of this vector Z, you are changing the whole image, or you are changing simultaneously many features of the person. For example, the key question again is, how can we disentangle features for independent control? Yeah, we want really this separate control over each attribute of the image. Now, here you can see the actual architecture of the generator. In this figure 2, you can see the traditional versus style-based generator. On the left, you can see that the traditional GAN architecture uses a vector z as input for the network, and in style-based generator we first have some mapping network which maps z to w, and this is one key component of this network. Another component is synthesis, where instead of feeding a random vector z to the network, we are using some learned constant. And this learned constant, you can imagine, is acting as a weight of the network. Basically, it's some fixed tensor you are using for all of the images, and it stays the same. And another component is style modulation. So if you have this vector w, you are injecting it at different levels of the network. For example, you can inject it at earlier layers, at middle layers, and so on. And it is acting as a style, and it is used for ADA-in computation, which is basically normalizing feature maps and then scale and shift the feature maps. The last component is the noise, which is also injected at each of the layers, and it is responsible for details of the image. Now let's continue with some properties of the generator. Here we can see that we have source A and source B, and you can imagine source A is, for example, W1 and source B is W2. And if you are using, let's say, W2 at earlier layers, you are extracting from this W2 some coarse or global structure. So in this left image, you can see that we are taking glasses from this guy and also the pose. For the middle picture, it's not that obvious, but we are taking eyes, nose, and mouth features from this guy. But maybe on the right picture, you can see that we are ejecting W2 at really low levels, low layers of the network, and then we are extracting some fine details like texture, hair, strands, and skin details from this guy. And yeah, this is for style mixing. Now coming to stochastic variation. Like I already mentioned, we are injecting some noise at each layer, and this noise is responsible for fine detail changes. Here you can see that we are, so for the same image, we are getting some variation for the hair of this person, and also on this heat map, you can see that there is some variation for the hair, but for this child, you can see that there is some change for the eyes and also for background. All right, now let's continue with some metrics. Yeah, FID metric measures the diversity and quality of the generated images. So quality should be high, and the model or the generator should produce, in best case, some variety or really diverse images. And the lower the score, the better. So here in this table, you can see that adding more and more methods to the baseline, you will get better and better results. And celeb HQ is a data set which is used for benchmarking and consists of pictures of celebrities, and FFHQ is a data set they created during this work. And as you can see, using all the tweaks plus mixing regularization gives the best results. Now let's continue with disentanglement metrics. So disentanglement, briefly to mention, if your vector if your space is disentangled, it means that you can tweak one component of the vector, and then you will get slightly different image instead of completely other. Or if you change the direction of the vector slightly, then you will get like maybe the head of the person will turn slightly. And to measure this, they are using perceptual path length, which is responsible for measuring the interpolation. Let's say you have two vectors and you want to interpolate between them. If you go from one vector to another one, and yeah, if you take some steps, then the change will be smooth, and it means that then you have really low PPL score. But if the PPL score is large, it means that the space is entangled, and if you take tiny steps towards this other vector, you will get like completely different image. And another metric is the linear separability. Actually, they created a linear separator or linear classifier to classify, let's say, males from females or smiling faces from sad faces. And they trained a classifier, for example, a support vector machine classifier. And for classification, they used vectors z, then evaluated for vector z, and then used vectors w, which uh, turns out that using vector w is the better choice and gives better results than using vector z. And that's how it was obvious that using vectors w, yeah, this is like these vectors live in disentangled space, right? And then we're coming to the results. Here you can see some sample images, and StyleGAN generates highly realistic, high resolution faces, as you can see. And we really have this disentangled control over image attributes. Like, for example, for this second row, you can see that we are slightly removing the eyeglasses from this guy, and we really have this control over the features of the image of the, yeah. Or yeah, for example, we can maybe slightly rotate the vector, um, and then this person will slightly rotate its head, and you can even create animated some animations. Or for this girl, for example, you can even tweak some parameter, and then you will get some, yeah, like different color of the hair. And yeah, now we're coming to the conclusion. Now StyleGAN presented was a new architecture, and they also introduced metrics for measuring the disentanglement and smoothness of the space, and also created a new dataset with 70,000 high quality images, diverse in age, ethnicity, accessories, for like you can use it for your benchmarking. And this was also a foundation for StyleGAN 2 and 3, where they even improved this version. Now, thank you for your attention and waiting for your comments below.